Welcome back to my channel, and today's topic is a fashion style topic, and it's how to find your attainable fantasy self. Now, for any of you who are wondering, I know that there are so many problems with the fantasy self, and I know what the issues are, and we're going to talk about some of those as well. But the reason I want to talk about this, and I have seen a couple of creators talking about it, but not that many, and it's, so many people talk about the negatives about the fantasy self, and we all know what those are. Again, I will mention them, but I really wanted to talk about the positives and how to actually create and find the version of your fantasy self that you actually want to be in terms of your style and your fashion, how you dress, that is actually realistic for you, that is actually doable, and that works for you and your lifestyle. If this sounds like a topic that's of interest to you, then I would love you to hit the subscribe button down below, and let's go. So firstly, let's talk a little bit about the fantasy self and what we usually think of it as being. So the fantasy self is usually an idealized version of yourself. And I wanted to start talking about sort of the negative connotations of this and actually the genuine problems that we do have with the fantasy self. So some of the issues that we can experience is that we can have this idea of who we want to be, and often it's just not realistic. So that might be because we're wearing clothing that's not comfortable, and because it's clothing that just doesn't fit our lifestyle. So do you know what, let's actually break these down. So let's start with the clothing that we think we're going to wear on the daily basis, and then we never wear it. So do you know what, a really good example of this for me is when I was younger, I used to dress very goth, and I loved that, and that was fantastic. And do you know what, it is completely okay to have a style that is very loud, that is what some people might think of as being over the top, and that is completely amazing, and that is not something that you need to change. But what I found was there were some elements of that weren't working for me. As much as I wanted them to work for me, they just weren't. They wouldn't. So things like platform boots. I bought this pair of boots, and I could visualize myself in these boots, and I was not wrong. I loved how I looked in these boots, but they were flat soles, and that was how I justified it. I thought, you know what? And I genuinely believe this. I thought, because they were flat, I have problems with heels, and I thought, because they're flat, this is not going to be an issue. I'm not going to be wearing heels, so why does it matter how high they are? It matters. I was wrong. They were, I think, roughly, maybe, was it 4? I don't think it was 4.5. I think they were more like 5.5 inch. I'm sorry if I'm doing these measurements wrong, but I think they were about 5.5 inches. I remember them being roughly about this big. They were high. They were high, and whenever I went to put them on, I loved how they looked, but whenever it came to actually walking, going anywhere or walking in them, I was terrified of falling. I am only 4'11", and this put me way above my average height. Everything felt different, and I was not comfortable, and I really felt, not only did I feel like I was going to trip or fall, but I also felt like I had a real way to go. I felt like if I fall, I am really going down. I also purchased a lot of items which were my ideal style, but I hadn't thought about comfort. So I had so many shirts. Yes, this is a shirt, but I had shirts in cotton. And these particular shirts, it might not be the case with all of them. I had a couple that were okay, but I had some cotton shirts that really felt like they would almost hold water. They always seemed to feel damp, and even when they didn't, they always felt cold on my skin. I didn't like the feel of them. And so I hadn't really considered, that I actually really struggle with temperature, that I struggle, with sort of sensory issues. I basically struggle to feel warm, and I would feel cold the majority of the time. And so my absolute favourite pieces in my wardrobe were pieces I was never wearing. Now, the second issue we can experience with our fantasy self, and I promise I am going to move on to how you can find the version of the fantasy self that works for you in a moment, but I just want to cover this first. So the second issue, and tell me if this is you. So here's something that we can experience is when we purchase items of clothing and pieces for events that we never go to, for certain, how can I put this? For a certain lifestyle that potentially we do not live. I remember doing this as a teenager, and it's absolutely hilarious when I think about it now, is I used to, I'd walk into a store and I would think, wow, look at that dress. This would be amazing as a cocktail dress. I can just imagine myself at a cocktail party wearing this dress. And then I'd have to ask myself, and I actually think someone probably said it to me at the time, Shosh, you've never been to a cocktail party and you're not likely to be going to one in the near future. So this is something that I think a lot of people do, is that they buy maybe not only elevated pieces, but they buy maybe, let's say, dresses. I think a lot of women do this, especially, is buying dresses for events that you either are not likely to attend or that you never go to. So now let's move on to some tips on how you can actually find your true fantasy self that you are actually going to be able to step into on a daily basis. So I think the first tip I would say is comfort. You have to think about comfort. Ask yourself, what feels comfortable to me? Not just in terms of style-wise, but physically. So is there a particular material that doesn't work for me? Is there a particular cut that doesn't feel right on my body? So for me personally, that looked like me saying to myself, okay, these cotton shirts are not working for me. What can I replace them with? What else might I be able to wear instead? What could I maybe, if I want to wear something that's long sleeved or something that I could maybe use it as a jacket as well, what could I use? What might be a good replacement for that? And satin shirts are, it's honestly worked wonders in my wardrobe, because I find that the material is soft on my skin, it feels silky, and for me, I actually think that's the most important thing for me personally, to feel warm. It's not just about having that thickness, it's about how the material feels on my skin, and satin has been absolutely perfect for that. Two, and this doesn't apply as much to me, but I think it probably does apply to some people, and that is, how can you take a particular aesthetic or the fantasy self that you have in your mind and actually make that wearable? Not just in terms of comfort, but actually in terms of aesthetic. So for me personally, I have absolutely no problem with dressing in a way that is totally over the top and totally overdone. But some people are not really into that, and some people find themselves feeling too conspicuous, too self-conscious when they dress full on with that aesthetic. So how can you take those elements and actually make them work for you? So for me personally, and this is maybe a slightly different topic, but I love edgy, and the reason I say it's a slightly different topic is because it relates to my particular aesthetic, and my aesthetic changed genuinely. So as much as I loved edgy, I used to be full on goth, full on sort of one particular box, and then I started to really enjoy colour and really bold pieces, and then I really fell into loving sort of that little bit of luxe, or sort of that glamorous feel, and I chose to combine edgy and that sort of glamorous look. And the reason this is relevant here is because I took elements of that aesthetic and I brought them into how I dress now. So I brought things like chokers. So this is maybe more of a, what I call it, a choker or a collar right now. It's maybe more of a collar at the moment because I have it that little bit lower just for comfort. But if I want, I can actually put it up, I can actually tighten it and have it up that little bit shorter. So chokers was actually an element that I brought into my current style. It didn't necessarily have to be as loud as what I was wearing before. It didn't necessarily have to fit that box completely, but it was one element of it. So look at that aesthetic and ask yourself, how can I pick out the elements that are going to work for me, that are going to work for my style, that I can actually integrate into how I dress every day. 3, and this is not something that you have to do, but it's something that you can do if you feel like this is going to work for you, and that is start out with a base. I was going to say a base layer, so start out with sort of a base outfit. I'm actually dressed in something that's quite different for me today, because I'm sort of all in the one colour, or all in this really sort of neutral champagne gold. My trousers are the same today, sort of like this cream taupe colour, but generally I do wear a lot of contrast. And I often tend to start with black. So I will often have black as a base layer. Now, it doesn't have to be black, it could be more of a neutral colour, but if you start with a base, I actually have a very simple, very plain, not in any way expensive, sort of a tank top. I have several of them, they all look the same, they have those wide straps. It's just a plain tank top. I use some of them for exercise, more so the strappy ones, and the wider ones I usually wear with outfits. Again, they weren't at all expensive, and I'll wear those with a pair of trousers that I really love, and I'll use that as the base. And then you can actually start putting on maybe your louder pieces or whatever pieces feel related to your fantasy self, you can start adding those onto your layer, and that could, or onto your base, and that can be a really easy way to sort of create that fantasy self aesthetic, whatever it is that you're going for. 4, and I think this is really, really important, buy elevated pieces, if that is something that relates to your fantasy self, buy fantasy self related pieces or elevated pieces that actually work for day to day. Like this, for example, this is a shirt. It's a satin shirt. It really makes me feel like I'm elevating this outfit. It really gives it that elevation, but it's still something that I can use as a day-to-day piece. It's not a dress. It's not something that I need a party to go to. It's something that I can wear on the everyday, but it really does give it that feeling of being elevated. So choose pieces that are practical and day-to-day pieces, but that actually look elevated, or that actually look like that fantasy self aesthetic. And that brings me on to number 5. I'm wondering whether to do these two separately or whether to actually combine them into one. I think I might combine them into one here, have this as number 5, and that is material and colour. Think about material and colour. So again, think about materials like satin or silk that will actually give it that feel of elevation, but again, that will work with everyday pieces. Think about colour. What colour could you use to really make that fantasy self come to life? Again, whatever that fantasy self is for you. But let's say you wanted, over Christmas I was seeing so many beautiful outfit videos with really festive colours like green and red, and that is such a really fast way to elevate an outfit, I think, especially if you combine the material and the colour. So let's say you have the velvet and the red. That is such an easy way to elevate something in a way that is still very usable. So it could be in a top, it could be in a blazer. And 6, accessorize. This can make a major difference. Like what I'm wearing today, the necklace, the earrings. I know that this is, again, probably a little bit loud for some people, but you know what? It's really easy to do. If you want to elevate your outfit, it is so easy to put on a really loud or elevated or beautiful, even if your aesthetic or your style is that bit more subtle. It's really easy just to put on a really great pair of earrings that are really good quality, or, that are really sort of fashion jewelry that you really love the look of. It's a really, really easy way to elevate the outfit. In conclusion, what I really want to say to you is, at the end of the day, you dress for you. You should be dressing for yourself. It doesn't matter if you're not going to leave the house. It doesn't matter if you're not going to see anyone at all, or if you're only going to see people in your home or in your immediate family. You get to dress in a way that makes you feel good. And I think so many of us feel like we need, I talked about this recently, so many of us feel like we, if I've posted that video, like we need to have an excuse to dress the way that we really want to dress, and to actually really make that effort with how it is that we're dressing and styling ourselves. You do not need an excuse to wear your favourite pieces, to wear what you really, really love to wear, and as long as they work for you every day and they're not sort of dresses that are not appropriate to actually do your chores and the things that you need to do, then why not wear those pieces? And lastly, change. So many of us, I think, are maybe actually just used to dressing in a particular way, and we feel like, oh, well, that's not really me. I dress in the way that's easy. And actually, do you know what? It can be really, really easy. It was very easy for me. Well, actually, I'm wearing a bodysuit, so today it was slightly less easy because I had to do, the battle that you have with the bodysuit. But apart from that, it was really easy to dress like this today. So don't be afraid of changing your habits and changing the way that you dress, because as long as what you're wearing is comfortable and it actually works for your lifestyle, then there's absolutely no reason why you cannot dress as your fantasy self and dress the way that you really, really want to dress. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. So I'd love to hear which side you're on. Now, I'm not saying that you have to choose sides. I'm meaning more, are you sort of on the side where you've struggled with your fantasy self, where you've maybe bought a load of pieces for your fantasy self that haven't worked out for you because maybe you were, again, I know we talked a bit about that, maybe you were buying for certain occasions, or maybe they just weren't practical for your lifestyle and you really had regrets about that? Or on the other hand, are you really sort of wanting to step into this newer, fresher version of yourself that wears, certain pieces that you really, really love? And I really want to say at this point that it is extremely possible to be both. You might have bought items for your fantasy self that have not worked, and maybe you've actually fallen back into a style that was really easy because you thought, okay, the fantasy self, gonna throw that out the window, that's ridiculous, that's clearly not working for me. And maybe you've fallen into a style that feels maybe way too everyday for you, and maybe feels like it doesn't really have maybe that bit of magic that you'd really like, and so maybe you've struggled with the fantasy self, but actually you would like to step into a version of yourself that does feel that bit more elevated, or that does feel that bit more loud, or more true to, you know, a particular aesthetic or to your authenticity. So yeah, I would love to hear from you down in the comments. I will leave my Instagram handle down below as well, so follow me on there. Also, please subscribe to the channel if this is something that you would like to see again, if you enjoyed the video, and please don't forget to hit the like button. I'm also going to leave links for how to work with me down below, and I think I mentioned this recently, but I'm thinking of adding some more products to my Podia suite as well, and I also have some other things I'm contemplating, so keep an eye out for those in my link tree. So thank you for watching, and I will see you again really soon in my next video.